So, hey, everyone. Thanks for joining in today at Super Soul Solutions Radio for Part 2 with guest Peter Moon. As a quick reminder, Part 1 covered much of the truly amazing, currently working holographic ET tech archaeology discoveries that were found since, I guess it was around 2003 under the Romanian Sphinx. Peter's Transylvania series books made it possible for me and others in the United States to read about these astounding finds. And really, because of Peter's expertise, he was handpicked to be the one to publish and edit Radu Cinemar's writings. So just a very brief encapsulation of Part 1, so you're not totally lost. These included the discovery of the Grand Hall under the Romanian Sphinx containing extraterrestrial advanced technology with chairs, I remember, for really tall beings who were apparently accessing hybridization viability with other species, among other things. So in this underground facility, there was also found a consciousness time travel chair, 3 tunnels, with one leading to the long prophesied Hall of Records under the Giza Plateau in Egypt, and an underground tunnel of gold leading to a room of golden thrones with an active portal to another, I think it was, galactic dimension. So today, Peter will be sharing more amazing explorations of Radu Cinemar, who, remember, is a member of the most secret department of the Romanian Intelligence Service, that is called Department Zero. I love that name because of 0 point energy. Excuse me. The United States Pentagon works in collaboration with Department Zero to have access to the groundbreaking, pun intended, discoveries. Most recently, Peter published 2 more books about Radu's expeditions called Inside the Earth, about meeting advanced human civilizations there, and the second book, Forgotten Genesis, which is the first time in all my research I have found information in detail explaining and illustrating. I think there's almost 70 elaborate drawings in that book exactly. So it details exactly how multiple extraterrestrial civilizations influence and steer the DNA of humanity in order for us to keep evolving to a higher state. So I was really excited to read that. Peter has been known for his knowledge and investigation of space-time projects that point to secret projects, past, present, and future, that control time and the perception of time. He studied creative writing, literature, Eastern religion, and Western occultism, culminating in forging an association with some of the world's foremost expert scientists in electromagnetic phenomena and secret experiments in time control. So with that being said, welcome back, Peter.
Thank you. It's nice to be back with you, Marilee.
Thank you. Thank you. So there's a lot to cover again, and you did such a great job 2 weeks ago. So would you mind starting with the talking however you will and whatever comes to you about the inner Earth discoveries?
Well, Radu's book, Inside the Earth, The Second Tunnel, is a very remarkable book because we've heard stories of the inner Earth, the land beyond the poles. These go back to the Richard Shaver materials that were published, I think, in the 40s or 50s. They go back to the stories of Admiral Byrd and a host of other stories. There was Jules Verne, The Journey to the Center of the Earth. And, of course, Jules Verne had a very strong connection to Transylvania. He wrote a book called Castle in the Carpathians. He had a wife from Transylvania, and it was pursuing some of that legacy that led me to a dinosaur museum in Transylvania. It's very modest. It's the size of a small house, but it goes back into the origin of dragons or dinosaurs coming from Transylvania. As they go eastward, they become venerated into the Chinese, who look at the dragon as a very powerful entity and a positive entity. In the West, it became demonized, slaying of the dragon. However, but a very rich legacy of inside of the so-called inner earth. What's remarkable about Radu's book is he gives more explanation, discussion leading to a deep understanding in ways that the previous literature barely alludes to. It's the previous literature, in my estimation, is high on hype and doesn't really deliver anything of substance.
I agree with that, and I was just so excited. I read it all in one night. So I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I wish I could have. I'm glad you were able to read it on one night, because translating that book was hell. It was absolute hell.
I can't even imagine.
And in fact, this book, and it's interesting because the first problem I had was getting the book into my hands, getting the book. And it took, I heard about the book being released. I write to my publisher in Romania, and I hear nothing back until finally I get a letter from Radu himself. I have not heard from Radu in like about 8 years. He's been silent with me. We had a pretty voluminous correspondence prior to that, and then he went silent. He says, "Oh, what, don't you like the book? What don't you want to publish it?" And I did not tell him. I was too courteous to tell him that the publisher didn't send me the book. How can I publish it if I don't have the book? And so even then I didn't get the book because I didn't want to disparage my publisher. And he is a very nice man, and he's been very good to me, but he doesn't always answer his emails, not just with me, with anybody. So I don't know why that is. I find that
it wasn't interference. It wasn't interference.
No, it was interference on an etheric level, but not on because he will not answer many people that actually want to do business with him. Well, you want to translate your materials, so they come to me and I send them to him, and sometimes they hear from him, sometimes they don't. You know,
but
it's
the
like
bottom line is you got it. You did.
What happened is my in-laws brought the book to me. I didn't get it from him. My in-laws brought the book to me, and from there I had to scan every page and then prepare it to send to a translator that I have in Romania who was pregnant, and she couldn't do the book. My wife tried, but she was too busy. She translated about the introduction and a bit of the first chapter, but she just didn't have the time to do it, and she couldn't do it into a voice recorder, which is what I was trying to do. Or she wasn't comfortable with it. So,
do you think part of that, Peter, was divine timing in a certain way because it is so advanced?
Listen to the story. Listen to the story. So then I got it to my a young girl. She was young when I met her. My first friend in Transylvania. I sent it to her, and I said, "You think maybe you could translate this?" And she volunteered. And she was not a translator, and she did not a very good job, but it was something to work with. And I found that by taking, and then finally the publisher, and I was struggling with it, finally the publisher sent me the entire graphics of the book, which made, then I could produce the graphics, because there's a lot of graphics in that book, and he also sent me the original text so I could cut and paste it into Google Translate. And I learned how to translate Romanian this way. And then I would use Google Translate for some and my translators from the other. It was a you know, and then with the hard parts I'd ask my wife, and she'd sort out the difficulties because there's a lot of strange expressions that are used. And so, but I got it done, and it was tough, and it was so hard that when I wrote to Radu, he wanted to see the book. He was more interested in whether I liked the book and what I said before and after the book than he was anything else. You know, and of course I liked the book. I had nothing disparaging whatsoever to say about it. and he was happy with what I wrote. And I think it was that book he gave me an endorsement in of. He says a lot of people are claiming to be associated with him. No, they're not. He said I'm the only one that he stands behind. So but he said, I said what? I told him how hard it was to do this book, and he said, well, it's interesting because the book I'm working on I had the same problem with. And this is the sixth book, which we will discuss as well tonight, Forgotten Genesis. And he said that, I guess his mentor, Cesar Brad, said a couple things to him. He said, Cesar makes fun of me for having the problems. And when I told him you were having the same problem, Cesar wanted me to know that my work was appreciated. So it's nice to know that you're known about in strange places. But that's the story. It was very difficult, and I felt that the difficulty was proportional to the amount of enlightenment that this book gives to the world. And what's particularly important about this book is he goes into the science of the inner earth. Now, and he completely dispels the accepted scientific consensus, which is not scientific at all. It's a consensus of that the Earth's core is, molten nickel and lead, and it's not this at all, according to Radu's work, and it's all based on something about the Cavendish experiment, which is not actually irrelevant when you look at the science of it, and it's explained in detail in this book. So everybody knows in science that the Earth is solid core of nickel molten lead or molten nickel lead, and he said this is not true, and it's all assumptions, and they don't go beyond this. So he dispels that argument scientifically, and then he begins to discuss how the inside of the Earth and the inside of all astronomical bodies in heavens come out of black holes. And he gives new science to black holes. This is way beyond the thinking and of science. And the whole scientific world rejected black holes back in the day from Sir Arthur Eddington. Sir Arthur, and this is what I put in, I don't mention it in the book, I don't think. I mention it in my newsletters. Sir Arthur Eddington was, the head of, what was it called, Newton's chair in, I think it's Cambridge. And which Stephen Hawking was the most famous person to recently hold it. But Sir Arthur Eddington was the one who verified Einstein's theory, general theory of relativity. He vindicated it. He actually was one of the few people to understand it, but he vindicated it with astronomical experiments. So he was far ahead of his time. However, he completely rejected the theory of black holes as was presented to him by an Indian scientist who I cannot pronounce his long name. But I'm not going to say it because I just don't know it. And I just can't repeat it. But this Indian scientist was referred to by Sir Arthur Eddington as a yellow nigger. And
oh, boy.
And so what happened was the Nazis recognized and picked up the science of this brilliant Indian scientist, and they integrated it into their computer. They invented a computer long before John von Neumann did, and these are newsletters I've written and followed up based upon the knowledge imparted to me by Douglas Dietrich, an author that I will be publishing soon. And basically, so the Nazis had all this black hole science way ahead of time. And this book, corroborates that without even mentioning Nazis or anything. And it even expounds it in even more detail. And this knowledge is coming from the Tibetan Lama Ripa Sundi, known as also as Dr. Zen in China. And he is the one who put Department Zero together. When this man speaks in the dialogue that Radu has, you see a distinctly different cadence of words, choice of words, and clarity of speech. that is just astounding, especially when he talks science or metaphysics. So you see, it's not Radu writing at all, and it's not Radu pretending he's writing. He's quoting him. So
it's really the Tibetan Lama
that's imparting this knowledge, and he can go into great detail, and then it will be corroborated by certain things that Caesar says or Radu's own statements about science, but it's basically the Lama that's imparting this knowledge to Radu, and sometimes in the books he will get some science from the people inside the earth, because he spends a few chapters, one of them debunking the whole flat earth idea, explaining that the flat earth is what they believed back in the days of Copernicus and Galileo and later Columbus. So, and that people are looking for 2 dimensions instead of 4 dimensions. So after spending a few chapters debunking the falsities, he begins to talk about going into the inner earth, and this is what these tunnels beneath the Sphinx go to, and it all is about changing your vibrational frequency. We vibrate at a certain frequency in this world, and when somebody like Admiral Byrd goes through in an airplane into the North Pole and sees other, greenery and woolly mammoths and this sort of thing, this is explained by a change in vibrational frequency. But it's a change that is not necessarily fully integrated into the being of Admiral Byrd. In other words, he saw beyond the veil, but he saw more than he could handle. Admiral Byrd later had problems. He had problems, and whatever he saw, he really only alluded to. But in any case, people that might go into the Bermuda Triangle or wherever and disappear, they're going into another vibrational frequency. And this is a matter of conditioning. It's not dissimilar to going underwater and having to go under deeper slowly, and then coming up slowly, so you don't get the bends. And this is a matter of, that's an example of pressure. But vibrational frequency is pressure of another sort. It's another dimension, and it changes or affects the whole cellular structure of the human body, because the human body is going into a different experience and being subject to different vibrations than it would in this ordinary world. So this is a whole science of vibration, and this is because once one goes into the inner earth, but at a certain point, he explains that the way the whole earth generates is it starts out as ice and eventually turns into water. Not necessarily water, not potable water, but also the water, there's more water inside the earth than there is salt water on the oceans. This has been determined independently from what Radu is saying, but he also says it. So there's water, and ultimately, as you get to the core, you're getting into a different vibrational frequency. So he discusses one city inside the earth that he visits, Tamasis. And Tamasis is located near the Black Sea, underneath approximately what would be the city of Constanza on the coast of the Black Sea. I visited a cave that was over this area last summer, and of course I didn't go deep into the cave because it was a labyrinth. It was too deep. You have to go with a guide. But in any case, this is an actual city that's in the physical world, in our vibrational frequency, because there's a way for heat and flora and fauna to exist in a different framework than what we're used to. It's more limited than our flora and fauna, but it nevertheless exists with people. He visits these people. He also visits another city called Apellos, which is much more advanced and is in a vibrational frequency different than that of the Earth. And we learn, particularly in the subsequent book, Forgotten Genesis, that Apellos has, and the other inner Earth cities have contacts above the Earth in Romania, and also other inner Earth cities with other contacts in different parts of the world, and they're very discreet, and they remain and they have commerce and interchange, is what he's telling us. So there's worlds beyond what they call the surface world, and the surface world is very dangerous to these people, and they keep themselves cordoned off from it because all you have to do is to take a look at our politics in the world, not just the United States, but the world and the history of the world, and look at the politics of how, just how the world treats indigenous peoples. So there's nothing more indigenous than what's inside the Earth. Yeah. So you're dealing with a part of the human paradigm that is psychotic and destructive. That's not to say all of the human paradigm is psychotic and destructive, but certainly we don't need to discuss history to determine this. And I'm even accruing information that would suggest that Christianity, what might be called the quote unquote true Christianity, was actually a communication from the inner Earth or from another world. We can say inside the Earth. The Vesica Pisces is the symbol of two spheres interlocking or two worlds interlocking. And in early Christianity, you have the other world. They're pointing to the other world, that this world is transitory. And what that gets convoluted to, and in the perhaps more the second and third and fourth centuries, as that this world is evil. So you don't bathe, you don't enjoy yourself, and anything that is Roman or pagan is evil. And this makes existence on the earth plane much more miserable than it needs to be. And that you subject yourself to abnegation, which means denial, and this is your, testament to the other world. And in these times, this doesn't work. I can't say that it worked in those times, but you have a convolution of anything positive into a religion that makes everybody ultimately miserable and afraid.
Yeah. But let's stick to, I agree, and let's stick to the more positive things, because this is like positive news. So I understand from your research totally dovetails with mine and what I hear of, whether it's Telos underneath Mount Shasta or whatever, but they have a difficult time not only with the energy frequencies that we emit, but also with the pollution. So, it's a lot.
Yes, exactly. And you mentioned Telos. The most interesting chapter to me in Inside the Earth, the book we're discussing, is chapter 6, when he goes to Yosemite, which is, of course, southeast of Shasta. And Yosemite is, of course, a national park, and it's right on the Mother Lode. The Mother Lode refers to the great golden Mother Lode that the gold rush was a symptom of. The gold rush of 1840s was surface gold. That gold was just stuff that was in the river, stuff that you could mine easily on the surface. The mother lode of California gold has never been tapped, not even close. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing is, we talked about it last time, huge gold repositories in Transylvania, which are conducive to superconsciousness because gold conducts electricity better than any other metal. Silver is better than copper, and copper is better than other metals. But gold is the best, and it also facilitates consciousness of the brain mind. And so if you live around this
and
gold,
immortality.
Well, yes, there are offshoots that suggest immortality as well. But gold is super consciousness. Now, all of the gold in the Sierra Madre of California is at least what is controlled by a secret society that is ludicrous and funny on the outside called Eclampus Vitus, which is a whole other story I've dedicated a whole volume of my newsletter to. I studied it for 6 years. But Yosemite points to this, and he goes to a portal in Yosemite.
Who's the he? Who's the he? Radu?
Radu,
okay.
With his mentor, Cesar Brad, and they are brought there by the United States military because they have a portal and they don't know how to deal with it. And because Radu and Caesar are so good at dealing with portals to the inner earth, they are allowed to, or they are invited to come to Yosemite, where they go through a portal that's facilitated by the indigenous Miwok people. This is the only time they've gone through a portal where there's no bells and whistles of all this high technology that they're used to in Romania. This is a pure, I guess what you'd call esoteric portal, shamanistic portal, and they sort of gets a permission or good graces of the indigenous people to go through, where they have an adventure, and Radu ultimately gets to see the city of Shambhala in the inner earth. And this is perhaps, when you talk about positive, this is the most positive energy you can stir up inside of a human being. As I read this chapter, I could resonate with my own internal experiences of, I guess we all have a part of Shambhala inside of us. And it's a matter of cultivating it and refining it and accessing it. And Radu has not been allowed to enter Shambhala at this point. He is allowed to see the city, just a glimpse of it.
Could you share what the glimpse was, just for the audience, so they can imagine that?
Well, I don't know how to describe it. It's just like, it's kind of like if you envision this. What's that from the America the Beautiful? Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. What do you see something like the Acropolis or something? But I can't. It's just a city of magnificence. I don't remember the details.
I think beauty and a lot of nature, and yeah.
He's not close enough to see the nature. I'm kind of trying to remember it too. He's not close enough to see the nature.
Okay.
He's seeing it from a distance. Like listen, the first time you see the skyline of New York City, or even not the first time, certain vantage points, it's awesome. If you go to a city like Omaha or Tampa, Florida, you'll see a skyline. It pales in comparison to New York City. However, you do see something of significance. It stands out.
Right.
San Francisco is very picturesque amongst hills and valleys. You see, it's just a beautiful scenic scape. And I think any scenic scape you see anywhere of the earth, of the many fine places in the world, you get inspired by just the majesty of it all. I don't think it's really much different than that, except that it's not of this world, and it's a welcoming place it's like, see, it's less daunting than heaven, because heaven, at least the way it's been conveyed through Christianity, has sort of a, it can make people feel uncomfortable because it makes you feel like you might not be worthy. It makes you think of hell. It makes you think you might have to check in all of your human desires at the gate and become neutered. I mean, I don't know what people think of heaven, but it's often antiseptic. In Shambhala is you're not going to have impurities if you go there. However, it just seems more appealing to the human soul, but it touches something inside of you and saying, wow, this other world is there. And that is the message of original Christianity. There is another world. The kingdom of heaven is inside of you. Now, if you want to interpret that and go with it, or if you want to interpret it in the way of a fundamentalist minister, there are two different ways to interpret it. But it's a very positive thing to cultivate in your soul. Now, Radu is given a glimpse. He is then instructed by the guardian that he meets that he will be going to another place in Argentina, in Patagonia. This is at the southern part of Argentina. He does it, and sure enough, they do end up going to Argentina, and they go through another shamanistic portal where he gets he goes to another city, which would be the closest city, next to Shambhala. Sort of like, you live there in Marin County, it would sort of be like Sausalito. Going to Sausalito, which is right north of the Golden Gate Bridge, a beautiful city. And you go there, you don't quite, it's more beautiful than San Francisco, but that's beside the point. But it's like the next best thing, or maybe getting to Oakland before San Francisco. But so anyway, he gets to this city, he gets to experience it, and he gets much closer to Shambhala. And furthermore, Caesar has been to Shambhala before. So it's like, wow, but this is Radu's initiation, and this is, wow, this is inner earth. And you feel after reading this book that you have a connection to this world, and it's like, wow, this stuff is real. And I follow it up with my own journey. After I translate the book, I actually go there with all of this knowledge, and I have my own. I am sort of presented with information. I think I discussed it last time at Choclamina Cave, where David Anderson's research has determined that there was a great displacement of energy that could only have come from a time reactor 2,000 years ago. And 2,000 years ago, in this area, a lot of people disappeared. That's history. And now it appears to me, based upon data presented in this other book, sixth book, Forgotten Genesis, that the civilizations of Troy and Mayan civilization facilitated the exodus of people into the inner earth, mass exoduses of people from the surface world in the city of Troy and in the city of the Mayan civilization. The priests enabled them to escape, many people to escape into the other world. And this was corroborated by my experience in Choclavina. How else could these people have disappeared? It was experiences with dreams after having gone into the deep, a mile into the cave. So these are, of course, adventures for me to explore in the future when I can return to Romania when this, virus nonsense is over.
Yeah.
And yes, this is the excitement of what's to look forward to. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's happened so many times, whether it's magnetic shifting or at different times when we've almost lost the whole civilization. The ones in the know, usually the priest class or different ones, they go inside the earth because there's so many civilizations in there, especially, as you know, in the honeycomb of the crust and even different frequencies. But they also, we've had spacefaring civilizations way before, so as you know, it's not linear. Okay, so that gives us a amazing, so this is both in the physical and then the next kind of a different dimensional frequency that one has to adjust to, which didn't you say in the original when the military guys entered the Grand Hall, everyone started going into this kind of altered state of euphoria, and eventually the people that were allowed to enter had to go through preparation vibrationally to be able to even handle that. Am I remembering that correct?
Well, yes, but initially people who were exposed to some of these fields died horribly, like in the Philadelphia experiment. So it's now what's interesting to compare this to David Anderson's technology, they've had to basically learn how to acclimate the fields to human experience, how to create technology that so a human being can walk in and out of a time warp without discombobulating. It is very similar to what Radu talks about. I can't compare the two precisely, but yes, so it's all about human beings being able to walk between worlds.
Worlds, yes, exactly. Which, of course, the indigenous people have done forever, and many others. Okay, so that gives the audience a whole, sense of all the things that they're going to be able to find out. It's really fascinating. Let's go, in the last little bit here, let's talk about Forgotten Genesis, which about the DNA, and if you can talk a little bit, just really simply about the help we were given, and then perhaps about the two different experimental, shall we say, strains of humanity that came forth at the same time. Do you remember that?
Well, yes. Now, what's interesting about this book, Forgotten Genesis, this is the one with 70 diagrams and detailed drawings about the history of humankind and the DNA of humankind and how DNA enveloped. He sort of is much what Zecharia Sitchin was fumbling at. He goes into much deeper detail. Zecharia Sitchin is, of course, famous for the 12th planet. His books were very hard to read, but this is a much more detailed, comprehensive, like from somebody, as if somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, rather than reading and interpreting Sumerian tablets.
Now, did he get this from the holograph? I mean,
yes. Well, he got it from.
Remember, Raju got it from the crystal headset holographic.
That's
so
correct.
Maybe we should explain that to the audience a little bit.
Radu, after the Inside the Earth, he's now invited by the civilization of Apelos to come to a place near the Redizat Mountains in Transylvania, southern Transylvania, where he goes to a warehouse, which is an inner Earth civilization, looks like a warehouse on the outside. He goes in, he meets somebody, and he's brought in there, and he goes. What literally sounds like a soundstage, but he's puts on a headset where he looks at this holographic technology, and he meets people in holographic form. He also has a guide with him, and he is basically learns the history of human DNA, and it's like instead of you watching YouTube, it's him watching a holographic visualizations that is contoured to his own mind and intuition. So if he thinks of a question and asks, he can get answers. And the holographic representation is interacting with his mind. So this is technology that's facilitated and that he's prepared for. And he basically takes extensive notes and is eventually committed to telling this story, Forgotten Genesis. It's the forgotten Genesis of the history of mankind. And basically, he talks about human beings being seeded over a long period of time in different circumstances by different alien races. And furthermore, the way to look at this, and I think this is his own description, but if you look at a forest in nature and you look at human beings planting a forest, human beings planting a forest will let nature happen faster than it would otherwise. So in other words, just because humans plant the forest doesn't mean it's not nature. It just facilitates the interaction. Now, the whole trick in this book is to promote diversity. Life likes diversity rather than be sterile. And a clear example is if a royal bloodline keeps feeding in on itself and becoming too inbred, it becomes stale and sterile. Life likes diversity. And so this is all about facilitating diversity, which can include choice. And so, in other words, you're given certain parameters, not unlike a computer game. You might have a computer game that gives you certain parameters and rules, things you can do and things you can't do. That's kind of how life is set up to evolve. He goes into the basic theory of Adam and Eve and this sort of thing and what it truly represents, as opposed to, it's a more, I guess what you'd say, detailed story. And there are two basic lines. One is, which he calls and explains, the ENK line, and also the ENL line. And the ENL line is the spiritual line, beings that were more aligned with the spirit, a body that would be more conducive to going in and out of the body, would be more connected to spirit, whereas a physical body would be more like a worker, more like somebody who's built to do manual labor. And
Clydesdale versus a thoroughbred.
In a way, that's somewhat accurate metaphor, except it's more aligned with, from the time travel or the time machine movie, the Eloi and the Morlocks.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was remembering when I wrote the Yes,
where the Eloi are.
And they both had, go ahead, Peter.
Well, the Eloi are more, civilized and more refined, and the Morlocks are brute force, but it turns out that some Morlocks are going to eat the Eloi. It gets kind of weird. But, and this is the one case, is that the beings will consume, the lower echelon beings have the capacity to consume or annihilate the higher level beings, which you see in the story of Christianity, the New Testament. Let's destroy the Christ. That sort of mentality, let's take the most noble thing we can find and transmute it and bring it down to our level. And that's the whole story and the dilemma of mankind is, pursuing the lowest common denominator rather than the highest possible aspiration. So he goes into a lot of detail, a lot of history that he's been fed from this technology. And as you say, it explained a lot of things to you that I think you said to me. You were the first one, I think, that wrote in after reading the book, and because you read it when it was released on my website. And you said you'd been waiting for this information, I think, all your life, you said, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
Why don't you say a little bit about it?
Well, there's so many parallels with this in a certain way. Of course, the holographic material, the technology is been used in secret projects for a long time. So very similar, also given by ETs. And I think I look at it as they're trying to not polarize. Usually there's at least 3 things going on simultaneously rather than the standard 2. And so I see most terraforming of planets, and especially Earth that was about diversity, as a combination of evolution, creationism, if you will, and genetic overseeing. Genetic overseeing, experimenting, and helping terraform. And I loved how they described this, which was a combination of the alignment of these huge starships, actual energies of stars, and how that affects DNA. I thought that was fascinating too.
Well, yes, and however you want to look at this concept that you've just shared here, or anybody else's concepts that might corroborate or even be different, the bottom line is, in the traditional and current human experience, that the human being is cut off from this more evolved conceptualization of existence. He's cut off, and he's living a life that is akin to purgatory, where he has to pay the piper. He has to go out and get a job.
But that's shifting. That's shifting.
Well, maybe it is, but I'm saying is this is the current human paradigm, and it always has been. And one of the beautiful things about Transylvania is that this part of the world, you have families tilling the soil, that these families have been tilling it for thousands and thousands of years. They've never lost the land. It remained in the family. So you have beekeeping. It's people know how to keep bees. I was learning stuff about keeping bees I'd never learned anywhere else. I don't remember it all, but I was
connection to the land.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, all the land. In other words, the land is the land it was, and it's an unbroken chain of nature. So what I'm saying is, they're tilling the soil, they're doing the work, and you see a oneness with nature that you don't possibly see in this world. You see people with an organic garden in the United States, and it's like, hey, they're trying. It's almost, you almost have to be condescending towards it coming from this region, because it's like, oh, they're trying to do the right thing. Good luck. And that's not to minimize organic gardening in America, but when you see it, it's like it's kind of out of place.
We're trying to get it back in, kind of. One of the things we're coming kind of to close your time, but one of the things that I researched after talking to you about Romania and all of that I had no idea. I watched this special on Romania, and I'm sure you know this already, but for the benefit of the audience, is that Romania has the most wild land, the most in the world. Have you heard of that?
Well, Romania is about it's about the size of Texas. It's got a lot of wild land. I mean, Siberia is huge. Russia's a huge place. Canada's a huge place. They've got a lot of wild land up there too. I can't compare these places, but I'd say that there's an awful lot of exploration to do in Romania that I hope I get to explore someday, in addition to the areas I've been to and wish to return to. But yes, it's a remarkable place, and it's also sequestered. Transylvania in particular is sequestered by mountains. And I will also say this: when my friend Vonda Osmond planned a tour there, she planned a tour, and I introduced her to people to help her. But when she organized a tour, she had never run across so many problems trying to make this happen. She did make it happen, and she facilitated wonderful things for me by this journey. But she had never, ever had such difficulty doing a tour, just even making the commercial arrangements. It was like...
You have to be really sincere, and you get tested.
It tests your mettle. It tests your mettle in ways that other places will not. And so that's a whole separate story. But yes, it's you're passing through an energy barrier, and it's, as you say, when I flew in for the first time from Poland to Bucharest, it was like going into a completely different world. I mean, Poland is like the Eastern Bloc, the old Eastern Bloc. Well, that's like very, very much westernized compared to when you get into the emptiness of the nighttime of Romania. But it's a remarkable place, and I can't wait to go back.
Oh, one of these days I'm going with you, Peter. For sure.
Easier said than done, but I hope you can.
I know. So, okay, well, is there anything else you want to add before you share contact for yourself for the books and how people can get these books? I have just finished,
and I think you've read it, the new book, the seventh book, The Etheric Crystal, the Third Tunnel, and you've read that book, and that's now on Kindle format. It's not in hard copy. You can go to Kindle and read it.
I got it. Yeah, this is for the listeners. The books are really, really, really fascinating. And I just can only imagine, like you were talking about, the skill level you have to take so many multi-dimensional concepts and put it in a understandable and eloquent, manner. And I just love that this is coming out at least in some form, because this is really, really important knowledge, folks, to empower ourselves and everything. So why don't you tell them where they can get your books?
They can go to skybooks.usa.com, skybooks.usa.com, skybooks.usa.com. You can get them in Amazon. You can get them in ebook form on Kindle, Nook, or iTunes. And I would also encourage people to visit the Time Travel Education Center, which is my website explaining the math and science of time travel in simple language. Videos you can watch for free at that website. And it was nice to be with you again.
Oh, Peter, thank you so much. You too. Folks, we just realized a while back when I connected with Peter that, because I'd been following his stuff for, 20, 30 years, that we went to the same college together, but we never met.
Wait, the same college? I didn't go to college.
UC Davis. You were at UC Davis.
I didn't go to UC Davis College. I lived there. I went to high school there.
Oh, okay. But anyway,
I was at the university.
I was there.
I was at the university daily. I was at the first Whole Earth Day they had there.
Yeah.
It was a place I frequented, and I might have seen you when you were young, but no, I didn't go to school. I didn't go to college. It was not on my agenda. So, but yeah, what years did you go there?
1970 to 74. 1971 to 75, actually. Yeah.
You might have seen me in 71 playing basketball or baseball. But if you hung out in the gym, you would have seen me.
I did.
But I didn't see too many women in there. But in any case, So we'll talk about that someday. But so great to be with you.
We'll connect soon, and thank you so much for coming in and giving a beautiful rendition of these amazing, amazing discoveries that, of course, should be on mainstream TV but aren't. So, and thank you. And I would like to let everyone know to join me again in 2 weeks, where you will hear the latest research and validation of the afterlife, living between lives, out-of-body experiences, and reincarnation, by a friend of mine I've known for 40 years who is a media producer and documentary filmmaker, Daniel Drayson. And he is a fascinating being, had many precognitive dreams that stimulated his interest in paranormal phenomena, and he also witnessed a number of UFO sightings. And by the way, if you guys want to do this ahead of time, in 2017, Daniel wrote and produced a free documentary, so you can look it up, called Calling Earth, and it provides actual examples of afterlife communication via modern electronics. So we will be doing a interview and connection in 2 weeks. And I thank you again, Peter, so much for sharing your wisdom so beautifully and your knowledge.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.